You're listening to Titular Characters with your host, the adorable Eva Webb.
Let's talk nerdy things like comic books and superheroes with some nerdy peeps, writers, cartoonists, and so much more. Some fun with the lovely and adorable Eva Webb.
Hello, my babies. In this issue, we're featuring J.J. Walsh. J.J. is a superhero science fiction nerd and novelist, as well as owner of the San Francisco-based advertising agency, Iron Creative Communication. He lives in San Francisco with his wife, 2 boys, and a Labrador Retriever. So far, his comic book knowledge has not been called upon to save the world, and we might just put it to the test as we get ready to talk to him about comics. How are you, JJ?
I'm fantastic. How about you?
I'm having a great time. It is, as of now, I think it's Tuesday afternoon? Something like that. It's hard to tell in quarantine. So a little birdie told me that you've got a pretty exciting project going on right now. Would you mind opening the show with just talking about it a little?
Yes. I've got a book out called The Chowderhead Crusades. It's a science fiction story that's kind of anchored in comic books, and I've been asked to describe the book off the cuff and discovered I'm not good at that. I sound like I'm describing a book written by somebody else that I haven't read. So what I tend to do is actually read the back cover, which I put some time into. So I figure that's the best way to go because I really committed to all those words. So I'm just going to read through that. Does that sound cool?
By all means. Yeah, that sounds exciting.
All right. So the Chowderhead Crusades. Comic-Con 2036. The world is rocked by the bizarre and inexplicable materialization of Cateklysm Catholicon, a colorfully clad whack job decreeing that humanity's only hope lies in the lessons found in superhero comic books. Cateklysm's challenge is born, enticing even the most skeptical with a prize that promises the power to change the world. But 2 decades later, the world has gone to crap. The prize, the challenge, and Cateklysm himself have all been forgotten by everyone but the Chowderheads, die-hard superhero worshippers who champion the progressive ideology infused into comics. Enter Clayton Claiborne, a tragically orphaned 17-year-old second-generation Chowderhead living a dystopian nightmare existence on a Martian space freighter. Obsessed with the challenge, he'll face a gauntlet of comic book nerdery that will take him to alien worlds, thrust him into gladiatorial combat against supervillain lookalikes, and push him to the brink of annihilation in the heart of what seems to be the Batcave. But, as Stan Lee would put it, Excelsior. So There's the book. If you wanted to say it in one sentence, I think the Portland Book Review said it well. The comic book nerd's Ready Player One. And that is certainly at its core. There's a lot of comic book trivia in there. It's a fun adventure through space and different alien landscapes. But there's also this other aspect of it that is really about the socially progressive character of comic books and comic book creators and trying to bring that to the forefront, not necessarily in an academic way, but just trying to kind of celebrate the goodness of comics and their history.
That sounds like a lot of fun. That storyline just sounds, or that story summary rather, sounds absolutely bonkers. Just bonkers.
Yeah. And it's and in case you're not a reader, which people aren't, let's face it. We all prefer to have somebody else do the work. In this case, Patton Oswalt read the audiobook, and that's enriched it even more. He is a fantastic guy and a great kind of science fiction and comic book figure these days. So a really kind of a match made in heaven for me when we were able to get him involved.
That's amazing. And his politics are fabulous. I just love the guy.
He is. And patient and professional. And I say it in every interview and to everyone I meet, I'm a first-time novelist. And through, I don't know what turn of events. He ended up reading the book. I ended up directing him, which I've done a lot of audio production, so I wasn't completely ill-suited, but, it's the first time I had directed a audiobook, and of course it's one I've written, so I was precious about it. And, could we go up on this word? And could we, could you hit the punchline harder, Patton? Which I said several times and heard myself saying it, which is absurd. I'm telling Patton Oswalt how to be funny. But through all that, he was so professional and patient and just like, understood, okay, there's a vision and we're all working toward it, and just amazing guy.
So why write about comics and comic book fans in a futuristic dystopian landscape?
Right. Yeah. The first answer, I read Ready Player One, or rather, I listened to Will Wheaton read Ready Player One to me, and it really huge impact on me. I'm the perfect target. Grew up in the 80s with all the stuff that's talked about in there, and it really stuck with me. And I kept thinking, I think somebody should do something like this that talks about comics and the underlying, social progressive mindset behind comics. And so that was kind of the impetus of it. And ultimately, it just grew out of that. And it certainly went its own way. It's not about, virtual reality or any of that. But the kind of opportunity to explore a subject matter about which people are passionate and which carries a lot of nostalgia appeal to people in the context of kind of an action movie-esque sci-fi storyline. It was really appealing to me. And because I look back over my life, and I can tell you, where I was and what was going on in my life when I read a particular comic book or a particular series of comic books. And so every time I run across those titles, it takes me back, and nostalgia is a magical thing. Even if what was happening in your life at that time wasn't all that great, nostalgia kind of casts it through a rose-colored glasses. And so I feel like comics and music and smells, they're all have these powerful links to memory and nostalgia. And so comic books for me was a really powerful influence growing up. And that paired with the fact that as I grew up, I understood that what the artists were doing was much more significant than just telling stories about, superhumans. It was real social commentary. They were really saying something about the world, and more importantly, about the way they thought the world should be. And an example came up the other day. I saw Jimmy Palmiotti tweeted out the trailer for Shang-Chi and the 10 Rings, I think, is coming out soon. And I thought to myself, what a strange choice for Marvel to release a Shang-Chi movie, a character that very few people are going to be familiar with. I mean, sure, hardcore comic books nuts will be, but it's no Spider-Man. And Iron Fist is out there. People know who Iron Fist is, certainly to a much greater extent. Why would they not just do an Iron Fist movie if they're going to do a kung fu movie? Especially because they need to make up for what Netflix did with Iron Fist, which I'm not going to get into. It's too emotional for me, but it was not good. But as I thought about it, I realized it's 2021. If you're going to do a kung fu movie, it cannot star a white guy. It's cultural appropriation. It's offensive. And so is Iron Fist. And it always has been, not intentionally so, but Marvel, of course, evolving through the years, of course, recognizes now, yeah, it's not right to kind of promote that. Arguably, it's easier to tell a more compelling story about Iron Fist. He's an outsider who learns the ways of Kunlun, and there's an interesting kind of dynamic tension between who he was born to be and who he becomes. But it doesn't matter. That may be the easier story to tell in cinematic fashion, but it's the wrong story to tell in where we are as a society at this point, and we're evolving. So they're going down a different path, and I admire it. It's a harder road to travel, but that to me embodies what comic books are about. And I think the first story that always comes to mind, and I feature it in my book, is when the first Captain America came out with Cap punching Hitler on the cover. These days we look back and of course Captain America is going to punch out Hitler because that's right and it's common sense. But back in the day, the country had a lot of Nazi sympathizers at that point, and they showed up at the Timely Publications building, which would become Marvel, and they called up to Kirby's floor and said, "You come on down here. We're going to show you what real Nazis would do to Captain America." And he, of course, he was an established street brawler. So as the legend goes, he said, "I'll be right down." And by the time he got there, they had run off because they're cowardly Nazis. But for me, when I read that story, and I just thought, there was a guy who walked the walk. All the stories he told were so attuned to, doing right, even if it's not the easy or the popular thing to do. There's a bit of kind of idol worship going there for me. But for me, that embodies what comic books are about, is these artists this is the way the world's supposed to be, and we're just going to draw it and write it that way.
It's always been about punching Nazis, every bit of it.
As it should be. But yeah, I mean, the fact that he and his buddy they were just a couple of Jewish kids. I mean, they were, I don't know, what were they, 18, 19 years old when they created this icon, and they did it out of disdain or anger that the United States was not yet entering the war. And it was a statement. So comic books got into fighting Nazis before the United States was willing to do so. And it's, that's a big part. It's a big influence in the book, and I talk about it quite a bit, but it's just such a powerful thing. I'm not Jewish, but I certainly identify with that background, with them standing up to what was going on in the world. So brave at the time. And of course, now we assume that it was a popular perspective, but not at all. At the time, the anti-Semitism and all the other influences, they were literally risking their lives because people showed up and started throwing rocks at the building and threatening them.
Oh, yeah. So where would you say that your personal journey starts with comics?
I think the first one I remember is not necessarily the first one I read, but the thing that really drove it home and kind of started this whole path of discovery was the Dark Knight Returns, the original by Frank Miller, where, I had been reading comics for a little while, but, as I flip through that and I see Reagan portrayed in it and all of the very, relevant, current references to politics and how he was weaving that into the story and making a real statement. And of course, I mean, it's Frank Miller, and the art at that point was just so different and unique and powerful. And his storytelling, for me, that was really the beginning. And he's another big hero of mine. And everything he's done since has just been so powerful. And that, I think, for me as a writer, I can't draw. Otherwise, for sure, I would have been doing comics. But, I could only do the words. And I don't think I realized until later in life how much value was put on the words in the industry. So I'd kind of gotten into my career and ultimately landed as a copywriter in advertising before I really understood, hey, wait a minute, there was a path for somebody who couldn't draw in comics. So I always kind of wished that I'd been able to do that for a living.
Do you feel like comics as a medium are inherently political in their nature? Oh,
absolutely. No, and not even for the most part. In some cases, it's in the guise of superheroism. You look at the X-Men when it first came out, and is that Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X? Yep. Is it, as we move into the 80s, did it become a kind of a metaphor for homosexuality? I think absolutely. And even if it didn't, I think I know a lot of kids who were grown up gay at that time who took refuge in those comics, which had that message that was just like, so you're different. Not only is that okay, but it's great, and embrace it. And yes, the world is maybe not going to be so nice to you about it, but you should, take heart, and all of the positive messaging that's on a social level. And then you get to a more overt political level where Eric Larson, who I know has been on the show, literally drawing in, Trump as the villain. I think for sure it is and should be political, because otherwise you're just drawing, as I put it, super buffed guys punching each other into space, which is cool. I don't want to take anything away from that, but what are you doing it for? You're doing it essentially. It's positive propaganda. You are programming people and kids, hopefully, in the right way to see the world, and that may be very unpopular for many people to hear, that I believe progressive thinking is right and not progressive thinking is wrong. And I only recently discovered that was the case, which is, I realize I grew up in California and San Francisco, so I've been thoroughly programmed. But I was going to go on I think, interview on a show, and a guy said, actually, I don't think we want to promote this because I'm very against progressive thinking. It's like, it was so shocking to me that someone would say that, because to me, it's a thing that you can't be against. It's just of course, progressive thinking is how we all move forward. It's, we don't have the light bulb without progressive thinking, but there are people who literally believe that it is remaking the world into an evil place, I guess, or whatever it is.
Well, they might as well just say, "Hi, I'm a fascist,"
Yeah, which apparently, unfortunately, over the last few years, is not that unwelcome a statement, and it's been a very scary journey we've been on. And guys like Eric Larson really calling it out. I think there's a lot to be said for the more subtle, metaphorical stuff, and I talk a lot about that in my book. But I also have a huge amount of respect and think the time has come a lot of the time for you to actually set the story in the real world and make the commentary literal, because some people are not connecting the dots with the metaphors, and they ought to be.
No, you're 100% right.
Which actually kind of brings, I think so. I'm glad to hear that one person agrees with me. But the idea of that kind of, how do you make it real? How do you tie it back to the real world, and do some good? For me, as I was finishing the book and as I started doing the audiobook with Patton Oswalt, I started thinking, okay, so I'm writing this book that, yes, it's an adventure and it's fun and it's funny, and it's space travel and whatnot, but it's also got this heart of a message that is, try to do some good in the world, try to help people that need the help, try to change people's thinking to be less, closed-minded. And I started thinking, how can the book literally do some of that good? And so I started thinking about what causes could it be aligned with? And I talked with Patton Oswalt a little about that, and got to Alice's Kids, which is a phenomenal charity that just helps kids get the stuff they need. It's not super controversial. It's kids need stuff. They don't have shoes. They don't have backpacks. They can't, make it through life. And so it's a charity that's dedicated to those things that we think of as basic. And so a portion of the proceeds for every audiobook go to that charity now. And that's been a really rewarding part of promoting the book for me, is just saying, yeah, buy my book. You can only get so much, satisfaction out of begging people to buy your book. But when it's serving a cause that is much more noble than you, it's much more rewarding. So that's how the book is there's a meta thing going on where it's embodying its own message.
So you've worked in advertising for years, and you put out this book, and then you put out the audiobook. So you probably have just a ton of experience with collaborations of one kind or another. What would you say the ingredients of a great collaboration are, in your opinion?
I'm going to give you the worst answer in the world, but I think it's true. I think the best collaborations happen people are going to disagree with me and then probably have a much more sensible way of talking about it. I think the best collaborations happen between somebody who's really good at collaboration and somebody who's really bad at collaboration. Because there needs to be a real driving force, a real vision, that it's a kind of a my way or the highway mentality. And then there needs to be somebody who is working with them to help them realize that vision in a better way. So I don't mean that you should be rigid as the person driving the vision, but you need to be uncompromising in terms of your destination. The path to get there, I think it's good to have an open mind, but mostly what I've seen in successful collaborations is one person who just holds the vision, believes that their ideas are right, but leaves room for people to contribute. That's how you get a really rich, successful thing that gets to the finish line and gets there cohesively. I think when there's kind of, I don't want to say too much collaboration, but I will, you get something that's fractured. And you get, a great example for me is look at the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He is the writer and the director. I didn't look at the credits of the second one most recently, but I was just watching the first one, and the end of the movie comes up. It's written and directed by, and there is one name. It's not, the usual thing you see in Hollywood with 5 writers and then, the story by and then directed by. And if you can get somebody that is that talented, that has that clear a vision of where they're going, of course, he has a million people working with him and they are incredibly valuable. But without that single-sided vision, I think collaboration can turn into a bit of a mess.
Interesting.
Was that a terrible answer?
No, I'm still here. I'm just sort of pondering it, taking it in. So what kind of writer would you say you are? Are you the type of writer that plans out every detail meticulously, or do you just start writing and go?
I think I'm the latter by nature and just a little bit of the former by training, because you can get yourself into real trouble if you just start writing. But equally, I feel like, and maybe even more so, you can get into trouble if you try to overplan it, because there's so much magic that happens during the actual work, the actual creation. You don't want to close yourself off to that with too rigid of an outline or a plan. As I was saying, you need to know where you're going, how you're going to get there. You want to leave some room because for those kind of serendipitous surprises as you progress. So that, for me in writing this book, I had a pretty clear idea, not only where the story was going to go, but I often say, more important than that, where the character is going to go. What's their starting point? And where's their arc going to take them? Not necessarily what are all the milestones along their arc, but where's it going? And then kind of figure it out, kind of have some fun during the process. I'd say that's certainly the kind of writer I am. I think there are people at both ends of the spectrum that do it better than me, probably. But that's where I fall.
Right on. So how do characters, how do they find their voices?
That's a fun question for me. And it's I think, and especially because we're close to the starting line for me. This is my first novel. I've been writing copy for 20 or 30 years, but this is the first time I sat down and wrote a novel. I'd written a lot of screenplays. But again, a novel is a different thing. There's a lot more substance to the character that at least is able to come through on the page. And what I discovered was at the end of the first draft, most of the characters are you. And then you have to step back and say, okay, and maybe this is right and maybe it's wrong. For me, I went through and said, okay, let's start attaching some quirks and some devices, frankly, to the characters and start getting them some separation. Okay, this guy has an accent. And what does that mean? Well, if he has an accent from the South, for instance, one of the characters in the book, there's a whole host now of expressions that he can use, sayings that that really make him unique in the way he's talking. Another character, she was half Jewish, and her mother, the half that counts. And she really identifies with the early greats of the comic book scene and the fact they were all Jewish. So she's internalized that, and she uses a lot of my brain is failing me now. It's a lot of oy vey and oy gewalt, which is totally not realistic for the era. It's this book set in 2045, and there's not a lot of Yiddish probably going on in the world, but we're in 2021, and it's close enough to that point when you can buy it. But again, it gives her a whole rich kind of tapestry of vocabulary and really kind of ways of thinking that I hadn't really thought of before, because I was just thinking through the basics of where she was going to start and where she was going to end up, and not that richer layering that for me came in the second, third, fourth draft.
How do you approach world building?
What a hassle, huh? It's a thing for science fiction writers, I think, so much more than, especially kind of space science fiction. I'm in the middle of a second book that is science fiction, but it's set in the current day, and I just feel like I was able to skip to page 100 with that book versus this book, because in this book, to tell the story, you have to have the context, and there's just no getting around it. You have to spend 50 plus pages in as interesting a way as possible, setting up a different reality and establishing the day-to-day existence of these characters and how it differs from, the reader's life. And so, the upside there is that science fiction readers tend to have a higher, tolerance for that. But I think your typical reader is going to be like, I'm 50 pages in, nothing's happened. Well, nothing's happened because all the stuff that's going to happen is going to require that all of this stuff that just seems like details. There's space freighters going back and forth to Mars to mine this ore. And it's like, yeah, whatever. But no, the ore is actually central to the story. So there's no way of leaving it out. And you realize that you are having to convey so much information in order to set up the story. And that, for me, is the key to world building, is being aware that the reader's not going to have that much patience. So you would really have to distill all of these elements that are critical to creating the context for the story and whittle it down to the bare minimum, and then relate that in as rich and engaging a way as possible, that kind of bare minimum. So it's that balance between creating a really rich, deep world and recognizing that nobody wants to read about it. They all want to be into the story, seeing what's going to happen and being pulled from page to page. So it is challenging, but it's something that you have to do, and you have to go through the work.
So how, or rather, where does conflict come from? How do you build it?
Interesting. For me, it's at the end of the day, it's a difference in values. And we see it very painfully in the United States right now, over the last few years, coming to a boil. But you can't have a really rational conversation where you convince someone of something if they have fundamentally differing values from you, because all of the tools you're using are anchored in a view that is out of alignment with their view. So likewise, if you're writing a book, and you look at comics, of course, all the supervillains, all the good supervillains, they have a plausible differing value system. They're not just evil. Some of them do, and you can call evil a value system. But when you get into really rich, interesting, engaging conflict, it is because two characters see the world in legitimately different ways, and they are now thrown in together, either working toward a goal together or working against one another. And for me, you're going to have people that are on the same side and on the different side, and on the same side, it's basically they're on differing sides to the degree that their values differ. And in my book, you'll see the main character and his kind of love interest. They mostly agree, but they disagree on kind of one key facet of how the world should be, and it drives a wedge between them, and that wedge stays there until one of them comes around. So ultimately, it's values and the distance between your values, I think, that powers conflict.
Interesting. That's a really just a fabulous answer. So you're working on a regular book and you're working on an audiobook production. These really sort of feel like different animals, even though they're more or less the same type of content. What sort of unique challenges do you face when working on either one of them?
Well, I think the further you are removed from reality, the more you can get away with, specifically for me, in terms of character emotions and motivations. I think comic books have a lot of leeway. I think the characters can make some kind of stupid decisions based on not very rational reasoning, and they can kind of get away with it because you're so far removed from reality. But the closer you get to it, the more we're in our world, and the setting is something that we relate to, the less camouflage there is for somebody having an unrealistic reaction to a situation, whether it's a romantic situation or a life or death situation. The decisions they make really have to be anchored more in plausibility, which is kind of a pain in the ass, but it's a different kind of puzzle to work out. And that's the biggest difference for me, and why I tend to lean toward the more comic booky environment, because it's easier from that standpoint, and that is a particularly difficult thing for me, because I suppose I make decisions that are not very plausible to people in my own life.
I think we all do that, so don't feel bad. So I know you've only we're only talking about one book here, but do you have a favorite type of story to tell?
Yeah, I mean, I've written. I've got a screenplay actually under development, and that was one of several that I'd written. And I found that as I continued to write and then got into novels, there's always got to be a fantasy or science fiction element to it. And I think not only because it's easier for me to get away with kind of character motivations, but because I get bored. If I'm watching a movie or reading a book that's just about the world we live in, I just kind of feel like, man, I can walk outside and see that world. I want to be transported to a different world. I want something that's not going to happen in my life or the lives of the people around me to draw me in. So I think that's the only real tether between all the stories that I've wanted to tell, as well as a desire to get a laugh, which if you're not being funny, if there's not if there's not a light tone to it, even if it's in a real, dystopian environment, if you're not cracking jokes here and there, I just feel like, what's the point? So I think science fiction or fantasy stories with a sense of humor are really where I'm at. The only ones I want to read, the only ones I want to write.
Are you still actively reading comics?
Yeah, not as much as I would like to. And I am not a guy that has, several rooms full of plastic sleeved special editions. I am really a consumer. I like digital comics. I like to, I enjoy the stories. I'm not a collector per se, and I am not the world's greatest authority on comics. That was an aspect of the book that was somewhat challenging to get. If you read the book, the hundreds of references to storylines, I had to reread or read at high speed so many comic books during that research to plausibly convey a character who was an expert who had read all there were to read. But I am a fan. I'm not that guy, and I don't know that guy exists. There's just too much to read. But certainly when I follow Eric Larson on Twitter, and he does his, I'm always amazed. He does his, this week on the spinner in 1987, and he calls out comics that were on the spinner stands that they used to have in convenience stores, and he'll call out 4 of them, and he'll say, I bought this one, I didn't buy this one, but I bought this one. And the fact that he has bought more than 50% of every one every week, while he was growing up, and B, the fact that he remembers each of the ones that he bought. I'm assuming he doesn't still have all of them, though he may dig through them to check which one he bought. I don't think so. I think he's an encyclopedic comic book guy and is able to just remember because the artwork made such an impression on him. Of course, with the path he took, I can certainly understand that. It was really holy to him.
Eric says it's not a competition with that, but I think it's definitely a competition because I picked up. I think I'm about on par with him as far as the books that I either had or currently have. Yeah, so I've been sort of, haha, Eric, I got this one and you didn't, sort of thing. He doesn't really appreciate that very much, but I do.
Well, I'm jealous. I wish I could be more like that. And I haven't been able to keep up with my aspirational comic book identity.
It's okay. It's a lot of work, It really is. So what are you reading right now?
I've given this answer a couple of times, and it's a good answer because it says a lot about kind of fathers and kids and comic books. These days, if you go and watch in a movie or a cartoon or whatever, and there's Venom appearing, the origin stories they've trumped up for Venom, it makes me sick. So I've been reading my kids the original Secret Wars stories to show them really the reality. This is really where Venom came from. And I understand it's not a neat and tidy thing that you can, tell in 3 minutes of backstory in the movie. And I get why they change it, but it's a fascinating, evolution from, this puddle of ooze on this alien planet, how the artists and writers kind of either envisioned or improvised such a fascinating journey for that character over the years
Speaking
following.
of dramatically irresponsible character decisions, that would be one of them, one of the greatest of all time.
And another for me, and this is in the book, and I don't want to take anything away from some Sam Raimi, who is another hero of mine, but the original Spider-Man trilogy with Tobey Maguire, the organic web shooters, I can't forgive it. I can't let it go. By making that choice, they robbed Peter Parker of his ingenuity and his science nerdness. The invention of the web shooter, for me, is so core to who Spider-Man is. And I get it. It was, quicker for him just to get them because he got bit by the spider. But I've been pleased that they, in the subsequent spins they've taken on Spider-Man in the MCU, they have...
He's got web shooters, but he doesn't have any agency in the MCU at all. I mean, Peter Parker in the MCU is not even close to his own person.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I've been enjoying the recent movies a lot, but in the back of my mind, I keep thinking, why is he Iron Man's sidekick? A, why is he a sidekick? B, why Iron Man's sidekick? I mean, I could answer the question, but it's annoying to me, especially because he is Stan Lee's answer to hating sidekicks. I mean, Ditko and Stan Lee created him because they hated the fact that every teenager had to be a sidekick. They wanted him to be his own character, and he was a huge hit because teenagers were like, finally, I don't have to identify with Bucky. And so that's a really interesting.
And that was before Bucky was cool, like he is now,
I know. Well, I mean, it was decades before Bucky became cool.
Yeah, for the longest time, Bucky was the one that got away. Captain America's source of angst.
The boy wonder. Yeah.
So, do you have another writer in mind that you think of as either underrated or inspiring?
God, I have a really good answer for that, and I can't remember what it is. Inspiring is easy. I mean, that list is so long, but one of the ones for me is it's such a boring answer, but it's absolutely should be the answer for everybody. Like Stephen King, you look at just the volume of work, and my feeling about him is that he is much more that pure, I'm going to sit down and start writing and see what happens. And then wonderful things happen. And in the Dark Tower series, he talks about this notion that the stories are actually reality, and writers merely are just tapping into that reality, and they're stenographers. And the modesty, of course, of that idea from a Stephen King is dumbfounding. But that's a thought I had many times over the years, and to see it come to life in the Dark Tower made me feel like, oh, it must be more true because, there it is. So he's a hero. In terms of underrated, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I'm not going to throw one out because it won't be authentic.
That's fair. So we're coming up against the end of the show. I used to have a name for this segment, but I've been struggling with one lately. So for now, we're just going to call it the fun part. Are you ready?
All right. Oh, it's not a quiz or something that I'm going to fail, is it?
No, these are the fun questions.
Oh, good.
So what's your favorite food?
Pizza.
Love it.
It's an easy one. That is the correct answer. If you've got another answer, they are wrong.
Well, pizza's pretty diverse. It could be anything.
It's true.
So would you say you're a cat person or a dog person?
Again, I'm a dog person. That is the correct answer. I'm sorry to those who have given the wrong answer, but it's just the way it is. I don't hate cats, but obviously dogs are better.
Nice. What's the best swear word?
Best swear word is fiddlesticks.
You think? Nice.
Yeah. I mean, bar none.
Fiddlesticks is pretty good. What inspires you?
The list has gotten sadly shorter and shorter over the years. And when I think about what inspires me, I think about people who inspire me, and that kind of hero worship thing. As I've gotten older and more jaded, and people have let me down time and time again, whether it was Jean-Claude Van Damme in my early years. I mean, what a guy. But then he kicked his wife in a domestic assault. So couldn't be a hero of mine anymore. And then as I matured, Bill Cosby, big hero of mine. What the hell? And right around the time all of that hit, I realized when Bill Cosby was revealed, I realized I'd kind of run out of heroes to inspire me. And there was only one left. And he had stood the test of time, and I believe he always will, and that is Barack Obama.
Nice.
and it's maybe a cheesy thing and maybe obviously inspires you, but he is still standing after 2 terms. I was going to say sentences, ironically, as president. If you can weather that storm of the media, there's nothing to find out about you. He really is that great a human being. And we should all just hope that we can kind of measure up in some small way. There are people in the world who can really stand for something good and live good lives and represent decency. And they're not that common, but we should all just strive to be a little bit of what
I
he
like
is.
that. What brings you joy?
Not a lot. It's not really a thing for me. Satisfaction, fulfillment, those are important. I think completing projects. I think getting validation from the people I care about, and maybe increasingly my kids. That's really important to me, but I'm not really, and maybe that sounds really sad, but joy isn't really a variable in life. I don't think that's that uncommon, though. I don't think I'm just a sad person. I think joy is an elusive thing for a lot of people.
Okay, so you've got one wish, one altruistic wish to save planet Earth. What is it?
Unlimited resources for everyone. So it's food, water, energy. If we had that, everything else is easy.
Okay, so you wake up one morning and you are imbued with superpowers. What are those powers, and how do you choose to use them?
Do I have a bunch of them or just
As many
one?
as you want.
Oh, geez. So I don't have to specify what I have. Oh, I do.
What's your core tool set?
Invulnerability, time travel, and
There you go.
immortality.
I was just going to ask, what was your core tool set?
Yeah, I think those are the 3. Immortality, invulnerability, and time travel. Those are the ones I think you're pretty well set if you have those. What would I do with them? Make the world a better place. I'd probably have to hire some strategy firm to figure out, a vision plan, because there's a lot to do.
So 100 years from now, NASA takes your entire creative output, your whole life's work, throws it in a space capsule and throws it up into space. Sometime later, in deep space, or in some other context, wherever it ends up going, aliens find it. What do they think of it?
They think this was a planet of very strange people, but their hearts were in the right place.
Love it. So what's the secret sauce? What makes your work stand out from the crowd?
I think a desire to stand out from the crowd, and to do that with humor, and with honesty, which I think, looking at some of the things we're not too proud about in ourselves, and being honest about that, and recognizing that we're all works in progress, and seeing the humor in that, and the hope in that.
So what's next for J.J. Walsh?
Well, I'm working on a second book, and I have a screenplay in development about a woman who is a parking cop who gives that up to become a bounty hunter for the devil.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. Well, JJ, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to spend with me on my humble little podcast. Where can people find you online?
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. You can get me on. I'm at Twitter at double J Walsh, and that's, you spell out double. JJWalsh.com is the website, mostly talking about the book right now.
Hello, my babies. It's time to close the show. I just wanted to say thank you for being the most awesome people in the universe. Thank you for contributing and making this show possible. Thank you for listening and giving us your feedback. And thank you for being beautiful, valid, and living your best life. We had another contribution this week from Cheshire 2050. He said, "Stay adorable. This is Brad, and we all know that Brad is awesome, like one of the nicest people ever. Thanks, Brad." If you would like to contribute to the show, just visit buymeacoffee.com/EvaIsAdorable, because I am. All donations go towards the cost of production, and they are always appreciated. Titular Characters is a show about the things we love and the people that make the magic happen. It's produced and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. That's me. Sound design by Eva Webb. Also me. And we're still looking for a new sound person, so DM me on Twitter for details if you're interested. Opening theme by Antonia Marquis. Closing theme by Mikey Flash of Speed Force Music. And that's it, my babies. Join us next time for another death-defying adventure in cyberspace. Oh, and when you do, bring candy. Love yas.